Yo guys, what is up? Here we are with another reading video. And I got one update before we get into chapter 17. I am hoping to get a new microphone for my birthday, so my audio will be updated and sound better. And that's it. So we are on chapter 17. Oh, and my book suggestion for today is the Totally True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, or something like that. True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, you'll get it. Really good book. It really makes you think about how, while the people who actually have the opportunity to view YouTube are much luckier than they are, we have so much more privileges. And it brings you to think, dang, when we think that the reservation's doing a whole lot of good, they're really not. So it's really cool to think about that. So without further ado, we shall get into 17 of The Only Thing to Fear by Caroline Tung Richmond. Chapter 17. Zara darted behind a concrete bench, her eyes stretched wide. This couldn't be possible. She was so sure the Alliance had called off the attack on Camp Hammerstein. After Camp Hammerstein. But the proof was right in front of her. Operation Burning Eagle was pushing forward. "Freedom or death! Freedom or death!" the rebels shouted. Hundreds of them poured from the trucks, followed by hundreds more from the woods. A handful of them shouted orders through megaphones to guide the rebels into battle, while others carried video cameras to capture the entire fight. Hidden in her nook, Zara stared at them amazed. The timing of all this was incredible. Just when she needed the Alliance most, it had leapt in to assist her. If there wasn't gunfire surrounding her, she might have laughed at the sheer coincidence of it all. As another line of trucks hurtled through the fence, three of the rebels entering the fight caught Zara's eye. One of them launched herself into the sky, throwing grenades at the incoming Nazis. Another lifted a tank with a mere wave of his hand, tossing it over his shoulder. And the last rebel breathed a cloud of fire at the wave of incoming troops. They're anomalies, Zara realized. They were others like her, fighting with the rebels. Zara's awe was interrupted when an Alliance medic ran up to her. "Are you quick?" the girl said quickly, ready to move on to the next patient if Zara didn't need it. It took a few seconds for Zara's mouth to work. "How?" "Let me take a look at your nose." Like clockwork, the medic got to work, opening her medical bag and spraying antibacterial liquid onto Zara's face. A cooling sensation enveloped Zara's nose at once, and the pounding went away for the first time in days. Ear-shattering shots burst through. "The bombing at Camp Hammerstein!" Zara shouted over it. "What happened?" The medic brushed her blonde hair from her face, revealing how young she was. She couldn't be much older than Zara. "The Nazis got tipped off somehow, but we only had a few fatalities. Our real push was here at Fort Gorn." "Did Garrison survive?" The medic was already on her feet. "You're good to go." Then she was off again, searching for another injured rebel before Zara could even say thank you. After the medic disappeared into the battle, Zara shook away the shock of seeing the Alliance anomalies and forced herself towards the prison. Bolting through the jail's entrance, she found three guards lying face down by the metal detectors, the floor slick with their blood. Zara rounded the corner, the stink of sewage and sweat blasting into her nostrils, but she pressed onwards to the cells, where she found half of them already empty. The remaining prisoners shoved their arms through the bars, reaching for a clean-bottle woman who had somehow managed to locate the prison keys. The woman unlocked another cell, hurling another open the metal door right before the prisoners pushed themselves out. Zara was nearly knocked over by the stampede, but someone reached out for her, steadying her. "Zara!" Uncle Red engulfed her in his arms. "Thank God!" "Uncle Red!" she gasped out. She slumped against him, unable to hold back her tears. All of those hours of worrying, of fearing the worst, leached away into sweet relief. "I thought they had killed you." His voice nearly broke apart as she pulled back to look at her. "How did you escape?" "I don't have a lot of time to explain," said Zara. Thoughts of Sentinel Atkin's dead eyes rose up in her head, but she shoved them outside. The Alliance is outside. They didn't call off the mission after all. There are hundreds of them out there. Maybe thousands. The realization sank into Uncle Ren's eyes. We've been hearing the gunfire, but we didn't know what was going on. More shots blared through the walls, followed by grenade explosions that blew concrete chunks into the ceiling. Fill me in later, Uncle Red said swiftly. This building isn't safe. We need to get outside. Another grenade detonated, and one of the cells caved in, shooting a cloud of dust around Zara and her uncle. Prisoners cried out, still trapped in their cell, and the woman with the key struggled to free them. Zara wanted to run to help them, but Uncle Red yanked her away. The building is going to crush us. We have to go, he said. They ran towards the main entrance, but Uncle Red stopped when he reached a falling Nazi by the metal detectors. He stooped down to take one of the rifles, a pistol, and ammunition. With the smooth moves of a veteran's shoulder, he loaded the gun and tried to give her the pistol, but she refused it. I'll use my power, said Zara. Absolutely not. We're behind enemy lines. It's too late for that. Her gaze ducked away from his. I had to use them to escape the prison. But there are other anomalies outside for the Alliance, too. I saw them outside. How many Nazis saw you use your abilities? Uncle Red swore when a third grenade shattered behind them, jarring his thoughts. We'll deal with this later. We have to come up with a plan. Where do we go from here? We'll escape with the Alliance. They should have stolen the fort's weapons by now. We can't. She swallowed. Her thoughts overcome with their house and their farm. We can't go home. His lips spread into a grim line. No, we can't. He gripped her shoulder. The Alliance will take us in. We'll go to one of their safe houses. With a quick kiss on her cheek, Uncle Red raced to the door and kicked it open, only to go still. Outside, they saw full-on war. Bombs went off like fireworks, chewing apart the fort's buildings bite by bite. More rebels swarmed up to the fort by the minute, but they were met by fresh Nazi soldiers, along with the German Anomaly Division. A battle waged across the sky as the Sentinel strangled the flying rebel Anomaly, although she twisted free and punched him in the throat. Another Sentinel spat poison at the Alliance fighters, but the second Anomaly rebel batted him away with a massive oak that he had uprooted. Uncle Red pushed Zara behind a statue of Fuhrer Dieter that had already had its arms blasted out. Don't stand in the open like that! He aimed at two Nazis running towards them and took them out with one shot each. Zara watched the soldiers tumble onto the grass, finally understanding why her uncle had been considered the best shot in the Greenfield chapter. He didn't miss. You can stare at me later, Uncle Red said. His rifle popped again and again, both hits. I need your help, Zara. Snapping to attention, Zara held out her hands, urging the lightning to spring onto her skin, but then she heard something that made her blood freeze. Kill the Nazi! Kill Eckhart! The chant floated above the din. Zara's eyes jerked towards the sound. To her left, in the shadow of the officers' hall, Bastian was lying in a trampled flower bed, trying to fend off three prisoners. One of them held Bastian down with the other, again despite his attempts to throw them off. Skipped a line. One of them held Bastian down while the others pummeled him with their fists, striking him again and again despite his attempts to throw them off. Terror poured over her. She had to stop them. Stay here, she said to her uncle. I'll be right back. Where do you think you're going? He demanded. She didn't answer him. Shaking free from her uncle's grip, Zara ran to save the Nazi cadet. Zara gathered a flurry of wind and thrust it towards the prisoners, beating Bastian. The wall of air knocked them off their feet, hurling them into a row of hedges. While the prisoners staggered out of the bushes, she reached Bastian and dragged him behind the bullet-ridden officers' hall. They'd be safe from the barrage here, at least for a few seconds. She rolled Bastian onto his back and shuddered at what she saw. Blood poured out of his nose, and a painful scarlet marks had already formed along his jawline. Bastian, can you hear me? His left eye opened, but his right one remained shut. Zara? It's me. A loud hiss jolted Zara's attention away from Bastian's injuries, and she cursed at what she saw. 30 yards behind them, a Nazi soldier had lost a canister of tear gas, and the poison was drifting in their direction. She hurled another gust of wind toward it, but tendrils of gas snaked towards them anyway. I need you to get up, okay? Woozy from his head wounds, Bastian staggered onto his feet and leaned heavily on Zara's shoulder. What's happening out there? I got to the officers' hall early, but then I started hearing gunshots. Zara couldn't tell about the prison break or the Alliance attack with that tear gas snaking towards them. She scrambled for what they could do next. With Bastian hurt, she would have to get him away from the fighting, but she didn't know where he would be safe. She couldn't take him home, either. in case his father discovered what Bastian had done. Before she could form a plan, though, Zara felt someone shove Bastian away from her. Images of Sentinel Akin flashed in her mind, and her body went all cold. But then her attacker showed his face. "What are you doing?" Uncle Red asked, his pistol aimed at Bastian. "You could have gotten yourself killed. And for what? This Nazi boy?" "He's not a Nazi, Uncle Red." Zara jumped between the gun and the Bastian. Her words were colliding at the very moment. Bastian stood behind her. "She's right," he said, "Mr. St. James. Stay away from us, Eckhart." A second tear gas canister burst open by the officer's hall, spewing out its poisonous contents, and Zara's instincts took over. Grabbing them both by the arm, she called the wind, hoping it would be strong enough to hold three of them. "Zara, no!" her uncle cried. "It's too much weight." She screamed for the wind to pull them up, climbing above the noxious gas and guiding them towards the dense woods surrounding the fort. But Zara's lungs huffed with each breath. She pushed her powers to the limits tonight, and the toll of it was catching up to her fast. They wobbled midair, dropping 10 feet. There's a field over there," Uncle Red shouted at her, sensing she was about to collapse. Blinking the spots from her eyes, she steered them to an empty training field that lay on the very edge of Fort Goring. Rebel bodies littered the red-stained along with a few Nazis, but the fighting had moved to the center of the base, leaving the field deserted. The three of them tumbled onto the ground, arms and legs crashing against the hard earth. Zara's face smashed against a clump of weeds, and she sat up, coughing. Bastian was the first to stand. "Zara!" He dashed over to check on her. But he saw that she was all right. He said, "Can you get up?" At the same time, Uncle Red yanked her toward him. "I told you to stay away from her, Eckhart." Bastian held his hands up. "I'm not working for my father, Mr. St. James. Please, if you give me a chance." "Get back!" Uncle Red snarled, stepping backward with Zara in tow. He kept his gun aimed at Bastian. "Listen to me, Uncle Red." Zara broke from his grip, panting. "Put the gun down. He's the Colonel's son. He's one of us." She placed herself between the gun and Bastian again, the only way to guarantee that her uncle wouldn't fire. Bastian cautiously stepped up behind her. I know this is confusing, Mr. St. James, but we better find cover soon. There's a tunnel not far from here that we can use to get out. After that, I'll answer any questions you have." "We? What do you mean by we?" Uncle Red's gaze stormed from Bastian to Zara. "Someone needs to explain what's going on. Now." They didn't have time for explanations, but Zara knew her stubborn uncle wouldn't budge until she answered him. "Bastian's grandfather was a member of the Widerstand, and Bastian wants to join the Alliance. You have to trust me on this, Uncle Red." "The Widerstand?" Uncle Red gaped. "You honestly believe that?" "I know what you must think of me," Bastian said, his hands still up in the air. "But what Zara said is true. My father joined the Widerstand and was hanged for treason." Uncle Red didn't lower his pistol. "Bastian tried to save me from the hospital," Zara said. "He gave me the key to escape. Why would he do that if he was a Nazi? If he was working for his father?" Suspicion failed to ebb from Uncle Red's eyes. "We don't know where that escape tunnel goes. It could be a ploy." "It's not," said Bastian. "I'm not my father. He let my Opa die. That's when I knew enough was enough." He went on to explain his repeated attempts to gain Zara's trust, and then how he'd replicated the hospital key to break Zara out from the hospital. With each revelation, Uncle Red drew in a sharp breath. When Bastian finished, Uncle Red looked ready to launch into a barrage of questions, but the sound of an approaching engine stopped him short. The three glanced frantically around the field. "There's a trunk coming this way." Zara pointed behind her, where a Nazi supply ship rambled down the gravel path, zooming straight towards them. The soldiers must have seen Zara flying above the fort and had come to kill her. "The tunnel is this way. Follow me," Bastian shouted. The three of them ran, but the truck sped faster, its lights bright on their backs. Panic burst through Zara's veins. As soon as the truck was within range, the soldiers would start firing. She screamed for the wind to carry them upwards, but only a tired breeze heeded her call. Uncle Red fired at the truck's tires, but his magazine emptied out and the vehicle overtook them, swinging around to block them from the fence. Zara skidded to a stop. The soldier in the passenger seat shouted at them and waved his arms, but strangely, he didn't carry a weapon. Raising his pistol, Zara Uncle Red aimed at the truck again, but the soldier held his hands up, like he was surrendering. He cried out to the driver, "Aline, drop the disguises." Zara blinked at him. Disguises? Both of the soldiers climbed out of the cab, never straying a few feet away from the other. "Zara, Redmond, it's me," said the male soldier. "Don't shoot." Bastian took Zara by the arm. "We need to go." The opening to the tunnel lay just behind the supply truck. They could still make a run for it. But Zara's jaws nearly unhinged at what happened next. The soldier, named Aline, shut her eyes, murmuring something under her breath, and the Nazis began to transform. The female soldier shrank in size, and her hair turned from straw blonde to a rust red. In only a few seconds, she had changed from a middle-aged soldier to a 20-something slip of a girl. At the same time, the male soldier shot up in height, and his skin darkened from pale white to hazelnut. As his nose and chin stretched out, Zara talked in her breath at the new face that he wore. It couldn't be him. She was sure he had died at Camp Hammerstein. And yet, he was standing in front of her. "Garrison?" she whispered. And that is the end of chapter 17. That is basically the last chapter in the Camp Goring fight. But there will be many more fights to go. And many more fun times to come. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And I will see you guys in my next video.